Hello and welcome to Boxset Binge the Bible from Seven Vineyards, the podcast where we are going through the entire Bible in a year. We're listening to it all the way through from beginning to end. Thankfully not all in one big chunk. We've split it up. My name is Bern, Leckie. I'm joined by Owen, Lynch.
Hi there.
And this week we've started to grasp the biggest book in the Bible. Did you know that?
No, I didn't realize. I didn't realize it was the biggest one.
Jeremiah. It's the biggest book. A little bit bigger than Genesis.
Bigger than Psalms?
Which is a little bit bigger than Psalms. Yeah. In terms of number of words. But why is this big chunk of a book here? What's it trying to say? Where's it come from? Where's it fit in? What's it doing? What have we learned?
Yeah, my gosh. I don't know about you, Ben, but I actually found it quite hard to listen to. It's almost dystopian, you know, like one of those kind of dystopian movies that have become popular recently. Just like, just makes you feel as uncomfortable, unsettled. It's not the thing to settle down with you know, a bar of chocolate and a beer to enjoy yourself. It's not that kind of listen, as far as I'm concerned.
It's not cozy, is it? It's not. No. It's not a feel good story.
No, that's right. Yeah.
At least not this bit.
Yeah, exactly.
There are other bits to cover. It's a big book, remember? But this beginning, my goodness, yeah, you're right. It's grating and it's horrible, and I wanted to think I would feel better somehow hearing from a prophet of God, but so can we try and work out why? Where was this happening? Where does it fit into the timeline of the Bible? Where does it fit into world history?
Where does it fit into the timeline of the Bible? We're talking somewhere around the time of the exile of the southern state of Judah into Babylon. In the preamble to that, but also during it, we think that Jeremiah was living through the exile and the destruction of Jerusalem. Historically, I guess it's always difficult to say things historically because archaeologically, I think we would put this around about 600 years before Jesus in the Middle East, in the same place we would consider Jerusalem to be today. For me, I don't know about you, but it's I just can't imagine anyone wrote this down in one go. I think it's an anthology of poetry and essays and sermons that this person, Jeremiah, I think Jeremiah is actually a priest we know him as a prophet, but he was actually a priest. And he was speaking to the kings of Judah at that time. And I think it was actually a really difficult thing for him to do. And we can talk more about that in a minute, but I think he was a very brave man, to be quite frank.
Yeah. It was a very interesting time in history, actually. The writers try to nail it very precisely by telling us whose reign it was, what year of the reign, and so from that we can pin it down to apparently starting about 627, 626 BC. There was something else interesting that happened at that time, which was the king of Assyria to the north, their last great king, Ashurbanipal, I found out his name was. He did a load of building. He made the Assyrian Empire great. He was the big menace. You know, Israel had fallen. The northern kingdoms of Israel had already fallen. But when Ashurbanipal died, the threat seemed to recede. It was almost like as if Putin died, and then the war with Ukraine just stopped, and everyone went, oh, well, that's great. Well, we can breathe again. And there wasn't a replacement for him that was as strong and as dominant and whatever. So the whole threat seemed to shrivel up and go away, which is amazing. I guess it must have been a time of uncertainty. People didn't know what would happen next. But that uncertainty probably lasted about 20 years. And if you can think about that now, you know, if Putin died now, 20 years later, would people be saying, oh, yeah, we've got to be careful about Russia, if they hadn't done much? Or would they be saying, actually, what are you talking about? A threat from Russia? That was ages ago. And I think that's the situation that Jeremiah is actually speaking into. He's speaking at a time where in the rest of the Old Testament, we can see there was actually positive stuff going on. There were reforms, King Josiah's reforms, where Deuteronomy came into the picture, and they started sort of trying to live around the temple again. This was all good stuff. So scholars think, well, probably Jeremiah really ramped up his prophecy after that. And so it might have been more in the time of Jehoiakim, where things really started going wrong. But by that time, the threat from the north was a memory. It was almost a generation ago. And so when Jeremiah opens up and says, there's doom coming and it's from the north, people would have gone, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think he wasn't popular for it. If I may just talk about an interpretive key. Sometimes the Bible talks in such a way as to help us interpret what we're reading. And later on, and we won't dwell on this because we're going to listen to this later in the weeks to come, but in chapter 36, there's this interpretive key where there's this account of Jeremiah actually telling someone called Baruch to write down all of his sermons, poetry, and preaching that he's been making for this 20-year period. And then Baruch takes this scroll that he's written it all down on, that he's, Jeremiah's dictated it, Baruch's written it down. Baruch takes it to the temple and then shares it with everyone who's at the temple. And then some people take that to the king, and the king takes hold of the scroll and he burns it. And then Jeremiah then is in trouble, and we read that he's actually arrested and put in prison. So actually there is a situation here where Jeremiah's writings are actually politically incendiary, and that's what's happening in this context here. What we're reading here is that, my goodness, the king didn't even want this to be read out. The king didn't want to even hear it. Why? Because he wanted to preserve this idea that that Judah was still safe and secure, and the people didn't need to be concerned. I suppose maybe he wasn't even aware himself of a threat to his reign. And
if we try and imagine it from the point of view of living in Jerusalem at that time, the king of Assyria died kind of years and years ago. This threat from the north, people wouldn't have known what it could be, really, because they hadn't seen someone rise up in its place. They would have been in the temple. They would have had temple life going on, and they would have felt that because they had the temple, they would be protected, because God was in the temple, and God would protect them, right? They had the law. They were doing things that looked religious. They were offering sacrifices. They were doing a bunch of things. And so there, in the heart of where all that happened, would you not feel cozy? Would you not feel protected? And they even had prophets, it seems, who were saying, oh, it's all fine, it's all fine, it's all fine. So along comes Jeremiah. And I think the best summary that I could see, like really early on in what he's saying, is so this is why things are going to go wrong. My people, this is chapter 2, verse 13, my people have committed 2 sins. They've forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. What is it they've done? They've forsaken. Well, they wouldn't have felt they'd forsaken God, because here they are in the temple doing temple things and offering sacrifices. And they've dug their own cisterns.
What does that mean?
I think my interpretation of that is they've decided to work things out for themselves. When they need stuff, they'll work out how to do it. Nothing wrong with working things how to do stuff with their God-given brains. But they've done it without God. They've done it aside from God. They've done it against God. They've done it in ways that God told them not to do. And you get more and more examples of that coming up in Jeremiah's prophecy. It looks like they brought other gods in. They were worshipping idols in the temple. So in the heart of where they're meant to be getting their relationship with God and their power and that connection from, they've got a heart disease, really, because at their heart it's become corrupt. They go to the temple. There's all sorts of things going on there. It's like, it's not clear anymore that this is Yahweh's temple and that they're there to connect with Yahweh and rely on Yahweh. Instead, they've gone, well, we've got them, and we've got all these other gods, and we've got these other things that we're doing. And elsewhere, they were offering like child sacrifices and doing all sorts of nonsense.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's just awful, isn't it? I mean, there's this. I think it's chapter 7. There's this description of the Valley of Slaughter, and this idea that, like you said, that they're worshipping God in the temple, but outside in the Valley of Beth Hinnom, just out on the outskirts of Jerusalem, there's this fertility god that they're sacrificing the firstborn children to. And I can tell you what, I don't think I've ever noticed a sin so great as child sacrifice that God condemns in the strongest terms, and the prophets of God condemn in the strongest terms in the Bible. It's obviously it's heinous to anyone. It's heinous to us. It's heinous to anyone. But it is one of the most disgraceful things that a nation like Israel, who claim to worship God, kind of could possibly do. I think that it is this mixture, isn't it, that Jeremiah appears to be critiquing. I mean, I love this. There is this phrase that, I mean, I would say that listening to Jeremiah is just a bit confusing, because he just seems to go over and over the same sorts of stuff in different ways, using amazing language, like really vivid metaphor. And I admire his use of vivid metaphor. I really do. I mean, to me, it felt like a Tracy Emin exhibition, if you're familiar with her work as an artist, or even a Banksy. There's a cutting political edge to it, as well as an artistic quality. And I feel there's artistic quality to Jeremiah's words, but it's also riven with politics. It's riven with justice. It's riven with outrage. And but there's also humor in there. I mean, it sounds humorous to me. I laughed out loud when I heard David Suchet was reading Jeremiah on my app. Chapter 225, it made me laugh out loud, where it said, "But you said it's no use. I love foreign gods, and I must go after them." It's a bit like such a funny phrase. It's like, yeah, I get that. But I feel that there's just so much there's so much in this that it feels a bit overwhelming, and I can only assume that it was repeated sermons, talks, poetry that he would have written over 20 years that are really emphasizing the same points in different ways, which is calling them back to God, back to Yahweh, to worship the Yahweh without worshiping any other idols, and to live as a society, on the basis of the Mosaic law.
Yes, I mean, the way you're describing it makes him sound like Jeremiah was some really badly failed stand-up comedian.
Right, yeah.
He had his shtick. He had his material that he was trying to perfect and get out there in front of a crowd. And every single time he performed it, he must have just gotten bottled or booed off stage. Yeah, heckled into oblivion. Yeah. And but that didn't make his material any less sharp. What God's given him here, and the thing is, there's an edge to it which I think shows me something about the reason why God was so irate about all this. Because you could look at it and say, oh, they were doing religion wrong. God wanted them to do religion right. It's all about religion. Or they were following the rules wrong. And there was a different rule that God said they ought to follow. And so, let's get ourselves sorted about religion and rules. No, it's neither of those things, because this cutting edge that's in here is very, very relationship. It sounds like God is just a jealous lover, doesn't it? That passage with the "I love foreign gods," the bit before it is, "You are a swift she-camel running here and there, a wild donkey, accustomed to the desert, sniffing the wind in her craving, in her heat, who can restrain her? Any males that pursue her need not tire themselves. At mating time, they will find her." So, oh my goodness, all these descriptions of it's all gone wrong, a loving relationship's all gone wrong, and God is not happy.
Yeah.
And I guess that also makes me wonder, why does it come across like that? You could look at, if you don't believe in God and you look at the idea of God and thinking, well, God sounds incredibly needy then. Isn't like God's like emotionally a little bit, like where is he? How do you relate to that? I think the important thing that I would sort of anchor all this is a couple of things. One, the things that God's angry about and upset about, it's mainly this covenant, the covenant that came in, that was brought in not because God needed stuff from them, not because God needed their worship and their adoration and was going to give them something in exchange. Do you remember we talked about the covenant ages ago as the thing that's drawn up by an overwhelmingly powerful Lord who wants to put their presence there to benefit people, and what they want in return is faithfulness, so that when people see what's going on with this people that he lives with, the Lord will have a good reputation. Right, the Lord's very, very, very keen to guard their good reputation and their good name. Why? Is that because they're full of ego? No, because this brings massive benefits to anyone who wants to join in that relationship. This is the thing that God wants to do. So I don't need anything from you, but if we have relationship, I can give you everything you need and your life can be amazing. I just need people to see how amazing it is. And that seems to be the relationship breakdown, more than the religion and the rules, although they are also involved. It's all very relational, and I think that feels like it's important. It feels like we need to hang on to that, doesn't it?
Definitely. And I think one of the metaphors that Jeremiah uses to illustrate that relational aspect to it, he just accuses Judah of being like a prostitute, like repeatedly, as though she's just an unfaithful person, and I just think that's really interesting, because it's a very personal, obviously prostitution is of a sexual relationship as well, and I think it speaks of that intimacy with which the Jews understood their relationship with God was like, particularly in this case Jeremiah. I also think that we are seeing here this idea that we see sort of echoed in some of the letters of Paul, that Jeremiah suggests that what God wants is people who are circumcised in their hearts. Now, this idea of circumcision is a very Jewish thing. It's really a physical marker on newborn males, to signify that they are Jews and they are part of the family of God. And there's this I think it's in Jeremiah 4:4, where it talks about them being circumcised of the heart. Here we go. We've got it. Circumcise yourselves to the Lord. Circumcise your hearts, you people of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. And I just think there's a real sense there, along with other references to the Jews being like uncircumcised. Which is that actually their attitude indicates that they are not. They don't treasure their relationship with God. They're not intimate with God. They're not the people of God. And I find it interesting that Jeremiah describes not only Judah and Israel as uncircumcised, but also lumps them in with the same surrounding nations, Egypt, Edom, Ammon, and says, you're all alike. But in the same breath, there's this sense, and I think we'll see this later in later episodes, and we need to watch out for this, that Jeremiah is speaking God's heart for not just Judah and Israel, but all of those nations around them. The criticism is leveled at Judah and Jerusalem, but it's also leveled at Egypt, Ammon, and Edom, and all the other places around there. But equally, the hope that we'll see Jeremiah describe for the future is for not just Judah and Israel, but also for all the other nations.
Yeah, and we'll see more of that hope when we look in the sort of middle and end bits of Jeremiah. That's where he's going to land. Like, I can't wait to get there, to be honest. But just before we get there, there is this sort of doom and gloom bit that you think, well, this is a strange way of grabbing attention. Why not just offer the hope? Why not just say, oh, no, I can do better?
The same questions being asked of the current Labour administration in Britain, huh? Why all this doom and gloom? When are you going to tell us how good it's going to be in the future?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I would I would like more of the hope, please.
Yes.
I would like to go straight to the hope. But, yeah, so this important thing's happening, and not just bad words from Jeremiah, but as you say, it's surrounding this thing coming up that is going to be the downfall of Jerusalem. It's going to be the exile and scattering of God's people. That was a thing that was going to have to happen, because it didn't seem to be enough to just say, actually, why don't you try this? But that's hard, though, isn't it? That's hard. I wonder if I can relate to that. If we can relate to that, I know we could look at the situation. Like we could talk about the church, like we have sometimes, and I don't want to bang on about too much. I think sometimes I think God does want to get our attention. God does want us to see corporately, want us to see things differently, and sometimes I think the church, in the last couple of 100 years, look at evangelicals, looking at you, being one of you, going, hey, look, we've built our thing. Look at this thing that we've got. We've carefully analysed the Bible. We've built our systematic theology. We have a really thorough understanding, God, of what it is you want. So when science comes and tells us something else, well, we can bat that away. Because we really understood the Bible. No, what are you talking about? Where do you think God is? It's God's world. Yeah, numpties. It's God's world. You can learn from what God's doing in the world. Your systematic theology might have to fall down. Sorry about that. Reset. I'm obviously passionate about that. We could be, it could be that people who are more progressive have also got things wrong, and God wants to grab progressive people's attention too. That's fine. Why, though, would we hang on and not want to change our minds when God's banging on our door saying, no, I've got something better for you? I think it's just because it's painful. It's painful to let go of what you think you're certain of, isn't it? It's painful to let go if you're in a cozy place. It's painful to let go if you're surrounded by other people who are doing the same things you are and saying the things that the other prophets were saying. Oh, it's all fine. It's all going to work out fine. Look at where we are. Look how, we trust God. It'll all work out. That we might have to sometimes change our minds. And, in our world, I think the big obvious place where I think we all have had to change our minds, have had to and keep having to change our minds is the climate crisis. We have to deal with what will happen to the planet if we don't change. And we don't easily have a planet B, a place to go and be exiled on. It might just be death if we don't change. It's interesting how people resist that. And weirdly, religious people, why are there so many religious people who don't want to be told that? I don't get it. And they quote bits of the Bible saying, God said to Noah, there won't be another flood because look, rainbows. Like, well, if that's all that rainbow means in your theology, keep listening. I think God might have more to say.
Yeah, and I think for me, Jeremiah captures this really well in chapter 17 when he uses this metaphor of a potter and a clay. And he says, to the Jews at that time, the Judeans, you're like clay in God's hand. Like, if God chooses to do something different with you, then you've got no choice in it. Just do it. You just if God makes a vase out of you rather than a cup, then like it or lump it. That's what you are. And I think there's just like this incredible dependence on God. And I think, when we think about this dynamic nature of, well, if we have this special relationship, all humanity had this special relationship with God, then this God is not it's not an institutional kind of relic. God is a dynamic person doing new things in our world. I find for me the difference between the two words, I don't know if this is helpful, it might not make the edit this, but just a sense that when we study the Bible, we're trying to study the Bible in its original context, and that's what we call biblical studies. But when we then ask the question, what does what we understand about the Bible in its original context tell us about God? Then we're then taking into account what our present experience of life is and the reality that we live in, and therefore we theologize about God in that context. And people have theologized new things about God ever since Jesus existed, walked the shores of Lake Galilee. The reality is that we are in the same place, and we have a responsibility to ask ourselves, what does our current understanding of the Bible tell us about God, and what can we learn about God? And I think that inevitably leads to changes in the way in which we understand God, to our benefit, I might add, to our benefit.
Yeah, and then the question comes up: well, how do we know we're right? If we're going to
everyone's
disagree
asked
about
that question. Everyone's asked that question, haven't they? Yeah, right. Everyone.
Yeah. I'm thinking we've got some clues in Jeremiah that get echoed, and we actually looked at a lot more of them last week when we listened through letters, and people had seen what God was doing through the other side of the cross, basically looking at the incoming into the world of the Holy Spirit into people's hearts on a scale that people had never experienced, never known.
Yeah.
What that meant was this life was possible that instead of having to go to a temple, instead of having to do all this religious stuff, actually you could have the relationship with God wherever you were. God's within you. The temple is you. You're the temple. And the Spirit, how do you know what the Spirit's doing? Well, John says, it's love. And Paul was writing about the fruit of the Spirit and the love and the joy and the peace and that. Oh yeah, okay, so we can know what it is that God's doing. We can know if we've got this right, that this is God doing stuff, because we see this quality of life. It's not, I've got to be honest, it's not like I see that all the time in me. I wish I did. But I've been thinking about this a lot this week because it's been a stressy week. And there's been things that I know if I dealt with them just the way I would on my own, out of my own strength, I'd have had an even worse week. We had work done on the roof not long ago. Cost a lot of money. We settled it up in faith. And then what did we find the other day? Water coming through the ceiling.
Oh no, that's terrible.
No.
Oh no.
How are we going to deal with it? And in my own imagination, I'm imagining, well, how much do lawyers cost? Yeah. What kind of court can we go through? And I'm really kind of
of course.
And in thinking about it and praying about it, God's like, why are you so stressed? Because look, and all that money and all this hassle. It's like, yeah, but you prayed yesterday, right? Or you prayed today. Give us today the stuff we need, the daily bread. Yeah, I will. Do you know what you need right now? You need to chill out. And do you know what else you need? You need to just take a photo. Go outside, take a photo, send it to the guy, see what he says. It'll probably be fine. Are you going to be angsty when you write to an email? I don't know. I'm going to put it off as long as possible because I don't want to do it. It's very stressful. When I finally got my head in a place where I would do it, I wrote a very nice looking email. Copied it down. Hey, look how nice my email was. Where did this come from? Just before we recorded this, he came round with a whole team of guys. They went up. Went, oh, we're really sorry. They went on the roof. They fixed it all. They went, sorry, we're idiots. Well, that couldn't have gone any better.
Good. That's really good news. I'm glad to hear that.
And I'm only sharing this in this context because I know that if I hadn't prayed, if I hadn't said, no, I need to be connected to something bigger than me, that's better than me, that knows more than me, that's got more chill than I have and more love, all the love that I need. I need to write a loving email. I need to handle this in a loving way. Yeah. And maybe it wouldn't have worked out, but I know it would have worked out worse if I hadn't.
Exactly.
So there we go.
Good example. And I was reflecting on this these chapters of 122 that we've had of Jeremiah, that asking myself the question, what can I kind of learn from this for myself, which I honestly didn't get any easy answers, I'll be honest with you, because it's for all the reasons we've discussed, it's been a difficult listen. But I think there was a situation that kind of reminded me of, which was that it kind of felt like, I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, Bern, where someone else, comes to you and they want to have a difficult conversation with you because they've been hurt by something you've done or said. And they're finding it a hard thing to do to anyway bring this to you. It's even harder to hear it, but they explain to you how that your actions have hurt them, or your behavior or attitude has hurt them, and you kind of ponder it, and you kind of you're upset that that's happened. You're upset that they've been hurt. You're perhaps angry with yourself for doing something, that's hurt someone else in that way. And you kind of seek their forgiveness, and they offer you that forgiveness, and you are reconciled. But you know that the consequences of your actions are still going to rumble on for a bit. That they're still going to struggle. Perhaps you broke their trust or something. They're going to struggle to trust you, or perhaps the words that you used are going to live long in their memory. They're going to have to keep forgiving you every day, every time they think about it. And it's one of those things where it's kind of like, where you're sorry, you wish it never happened, you wish you'd never opened your mouth, you wish you'd never done that, but and they've forgiven you, and they're continuing to forgive you, and that you will be reconciled, and you are reconciled. But the reality is that you or they have still got to suffer the consequences of your actions. That's kind of what this kind of letter, or this kind of first 22 chapters of Jeremiah makes me think of. That that God has come to the Jews and said, look, the Judeans, this is what you've done. This is how you have wrecked our relationship. But I still love you, and I still want you. I still want to be your God. I still want to be your people. I'm not going to abandon you. But there are consequences that you're going to have to put up with. I'm going to have to put up with. It's not just one side. It's not God punishing. God's coping with those consequences as much as the Judeans. And that, for me, that's probably the only thing that kind of came to me when I was thinking about how does these 22 chapters how does that kind of make me feel? And I just thought that was just really helpful to know that God suffers the consequences of the broken relationship as much as we do. And there's two sides to a relationship.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. And I think the fact that Jeremiah keeps putting his finger on the same spot. We keep hearing his material, his new versions of this material.
Yeah.
And it keeps being about broken relationship. Yeah. And it keeps being about the need for repentance. And it keeps being about the pain that broken promises have caused. And it's one thing, from my point of view, to see it was hard enough for me to see someone else break their promises. Yeah. It's even worse when I know I've messed up. It's even worse when no wonder I want to put off the whole idea of repentance, because it's painful and it's painful to admit. And so, yes, this has been a really, really difficult section, especially if it's made us think about any repenting that we need to do or that we're involved with ourselves. But good news, we're turning a corner. Good news, God's culture isn't a cancel culture. It's a restoration culture. It's a hope culture. Even with the people that you think there's no prospect, why would I want to build a relationship? Why no, not them. God can just do amazing things, and with them and with me and with us, and I think we're going to see more about that. There's still going to be more pain as the difficult things get described and experienced by Jeremiah. But he's actually going to walk with them through that and point towards hope for the future, which we'll start to look at next week.
Great. So we hope you have got the endurance to listen to that section in this next week. And we look forward to discussing it with you then.